Okay, I'm gonna do a review of the Hunger Games book. Now, I'm gonna break this down into three sections just like the book does. The first part I'm gonna review is about the plot and what really goes on and what you really need to know. Just to the basics, that's all I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna hit the basics. I'm not gonna get into a big whole detail of what really goes on because you just have to read it. It's very complex. The second is going to be about the characters and their importance to the entire story, not only to this book, but to the two that follow it. I have read Catching Fire and I'm reading Mockingjay right now. So I'm just going to go over who you need to be paying attention to and why. And third, I'm just going to kind of talk about how I feel about the book and how I feel about the movie coming out, knowing what I do know about the movie, and how some of the characters that I felt were important aren't actually in the beginning of the trilogy movies. So, to start off, it starts out in a country called Panem. It's said to have been in where the North America was 100 years in the future, after a big war broke out against everybody, and everybody was gone. Then there was a capital, and it's just called the capital. And then they split up the rest of the country into 13 original districts, kind of like the 13 original colonies, which has a meaning, which you need to pay attention to, and you also need to understand that Suzanne Collins did that for a reason. The 13th district was destroyed in the Dark Ages, and there's no sign of life there. And every now and then on the TVs in the districts, there's footage of District 13 that is shown to remind people what can happen if you step out of line. Then the next 12 districts all have their own special thing that they stand for. Like District 12 stands for coal mining, which is important to remember because that's where the main character comes from. Actually, four of the main characters come from that district, so you need to realize that's vital to the entire story and background to the trilogy. So after there's a capital, and where the wealthier people, such as many of the peacekeepers and the head game makers and lower game makers and the president as well, they all live there, which is also important to know that there's a difference in wealth and the different people that live there. The people that live in the districts are more like regular people that you would see today. There's not a big difference in the way we look, but there is a difference between us and the capital from right now into what this book is talking about. In the capital, the people are very extravagant with tattoos, different hair colors, and makeup is extravagant all over their faces. The clothes are very bright and over the top with different jewelry, and you'll see that in the movie with Effie. That's the first little taste of how extravagant the capital actually is. Who is also another important character you need to remember. So each year the capital hosts what they call the Hunger Games, and it's kind of like what Survivor is to us, but on steroids. So if you could imagine in each district there's two people who are put into the games. There's a boy and a girl, ranging between the ages of 12 and 18, who are selected by a hand-drawn thing to go into the games and survive, and they have to survive, and only one person can win. So it's kill or be killed. That's how it is. And from what I see, everything is being monitored. Everything, you are always being watched in the Capitol. There's never a moment when you are actually truly alone. So that's another thing you need to understand and remember when you're not only just reading these books, but when you're watching the movie, if you're going to compare them. You also need to know that the Capitol holds absolute power over everything and everyone. They have invisible hovercrafts hovering in the air, making sure that people don't step out of line in some of the districts. In each district, there's an electrical fence that surrounds the district, making sure that no one can get in or out. That way they can kind of keep control over all the districts while they're still in the Capitol and not having to actually be there. Although each district does have its own peacekeepers who are supposed to be keeping people in line. So that's pretty much it about the plot. Most of the first part of the book takes part in District 12, where it goes over the different characters and what they have done in the past and who they are and where they came from. The middle is more of them traveling to the games and to the Capitol to be in the Hunger Games. It kind of goes over the situation and how they train to be in the games, what they have to learn, what they have to do, who they have to talk to, certain things they have to go over for interviews and press reviews and all of that stuff. In the second part, you also meet a lot of the main characters, not only in this book, but in the next two books as well. So you need to keep a lookout for that. And now we're on to part 2 of my review, which is kind of I'm just going to go over the main characters of this book, and then I'll talk about some of the characters who are in here that aren't in the next books, but they're vital to this book to set up for the next one, and then I'll kind of touch base on the characters that you might see in the next book that you need to keep an eye out for, or characters that come in from this book that carry over. The main character is Katniss Everdeen. She's 16 years old, who's the protagonist in the story. She lives in the Seam of District 12, which is known to be the poorest part of the district. She lives with her mom and her sister. Her dad died a couple years before the story actually begins. He died in a coal mining accident. And Katniss is the sole provider for her family, pretty much. She hunts illegally in the forest outside the electrical fence because she's figured out a way to get around it. After she's done hunting, she comes back to the district and to the Seam and sells what she's killed at the Hob, which is kind of like the black market for food in that district. Many people go there, and it's not being watched by the Capitol, and it's kind of just like an easier way to get money and a faster way to get food instead of relying on the district or the Capitol to provide them with that. So that's what she does in order to provide for her family, because her mom has kind of given up on everything, and her sister's a lot younger than she is, so she can't provide for herself, nor would she be able to provide for 2 other people. So that's leaving Katniss as sole provider for the family. At the Reaping, which is where the tributes are chosen in each district, her sister is drawn from the bowl where all the names of the kids are placed, and in order to save her sister, Katniss volunteers to take her sister's place in the Hunger Games. So that's kind of how it all kicks off with Katniss, and to know that she did do this all for her sister in the beginning is something that you also need to pay attention to. Then there's Peeta Mellark, who's 16 years old as well. He was born in the richer part of the district, though. He was born to a baker, and he does bake in the bakery with his parents. He is described as having wavy blonde hair and blue eyes and very, very strong, which is also a sign of being part of the richer part of the district, which is something also that is interesting because each district is broken up into 2 different places, and you can just tell by the looks of people where they came from, which is interesting to me. He's the male tribute from District 12. He was chosen at the reaping as well as Prim, who Katniss volunteered for. But Peeta's been in love with Katniss since he can remember, since he was a little boy. And the fact that he now knows that he has to go into the games and kill Katniss is really hard for him. He doesn't know how he would do it. I don't think he really wants to, nor do I think he has the mindset of that he's going to. I think pretty early on he's figured out that he's going to give up his life for Katniss just to get her out of there because of how much he loves her. So that's really like a bond, and he also knows that if he goes back it's not going to be the same, that he doesn't really have anybody else to live for, that he's in love with her. So she's pretty much all he's got besides his mom and dad. He doesn't admit that he loves her or has any feelings for her whatsoever until the day before the Hunger Games at the opening ceremony and the interview with Caesar Flickerman, who is also somebody that's important throughout the story. Not as important as these main characters, but he's still a big part of the story. Then there's Haymitch Abernathy, who is the mentor to Peeta and Katniss, and he won the 50th Hunger Games. So he knows what's going on. Like, he knows what they're going through. He knows what they're going to have to go through in order to survive this. But he's been haunted by his dreams of the games that he encountered. So he's rarely ever sober. And in the beginning, he doesn't really care that much to help Katniss and Peeta. He doesn't give them any direction up until they decide to prove themselves. That's when he guides them through the rest of the story. Once they show that they're serious about this and that it does mean something to them, that they are trying and that they're not just going to go in there and give up like every other person, then he helps them. Then there's Gale, who's 18 and is Katniss's best friend. They met in the woods years before the story takes place. They met illegally hunting, and Gale's dad also died in the same coal mining accident as Katniss's dad. So she has that special bond with him, and she also knows and feels that Gale is the only person that she can be herself around. And although he's not very relevant in this book, he doesn't have that many talking scenes, but to her, since it's all in a first-person perspective, it is very important that you remember him, because she talks about him all the time. She is torn between him and Peeta, not only in the Hunger Games, but in the movie, in the book after, and the movie after, and the book after that, and the movie after that. It's a very, very twisted relationship between the 3 of them. She loves Peeta, but she loves Gale, and it's 2 totally different people you're talking about. Gale and Peeta are nothing alike, so having to choose between them would be hard, since one has one thing and one has the other. although you can't have them both, she doesn't know what to do. She doesn't even know how to handle what she's going through, let alone figure out what she really wants for in her life. Then, the other important characters that are talked about in this book but don't go into great details about are President Snow, who is the president of Panem and the overall ruler of pretty much the entire country. Anything he says goes, no matter what. He doesn't really show his true colors towards the beginning nor the middle, but at the end he is very important because it carries over into the next book. And without really knowing who this man is, you're not going to understand what's going on or why the things that happened in the second book happen. So you need to understand who that is. Effie Trinket is very eccentric. She's the escort for Peeta and Katniss in the games. She's also the one who picked out Prim's name and Peeta's name. So keep her in mind, but you'll never miss her in the movie nor in the book. Her description for her is very extravagant and very over the top. You'll know it's her. She's got great wigs and colorful clothes. Then there's Prim, who's Katniss' sister, who's younger than her, who was chosen to go into the games, but Katniss volunteered. There's Cena, who is Katniss' stylist, who not very important in this book, but does make a very big impression in the second book. So, although there aren't very many characters in the first book, there are tons in the second book, and being able to remember these and having that special connection with them will help you to understand the next two books. And then the other tributes from the districts that are mentioned in the book. There's Rue, who's from District 2, or District 11, who Katniss forms a bond with because she reminds Katniss of Prim while in the games. Katniss is out in the games alone, doesn't really know what to do, missing home, wants to give up but knows she can't because she needs to win for Prim, and then she and Rue become friends, allies, and form a team, and she is sitting there and walking with Rue, just thinking of how much Rue reminds her of Prim, and that forms a bond between them. Then there's Cato. He's the guy from District 2. There's Clove, the female from District 2. Foxface, who isn't known by any other name but Foxface, and she's a tribute from District 5. There's Thresh from District 11. He's the male tribute, along with Rue, who's the female. Then Glimmer from District 1, and Marvel from District 1. Now the other districts aren't really mentioned. They're not as important. They're more of the weaker characters who don't make a big impression on Katniss. But these do. So these are like people that you need to know and need to make an impression on you, or you're just not going to really understand why things happen or why things have a certain meaning. Now for part 3, my personal feelings about the book. I loved it. I did not like to read until I read this book. This book changed everything for me. Finally, for a female having that role and having that power and responsibility of being the leader and winning and just wanting to be the best just for your family, having that goal to win for your family is something that means a lot to me. I personally love the series. It's a great book. I wouldn't recommend it for children in lower middle school or elementary school because of the violence. And some of the meanings and symbols just have, you need to be fully aware of what is really going on. And I don't think that the younger kids can grasp that. From what I have seen of the movies, from the trailers and stuff I've researched on IMDb and other websites, one of the important characters that I felt was important was Madge, who is Katniss's only female friend, who in the book gives her the pin of the Mockingjay that you see on the cover of the Hunger Games, which is a vital information for the second book, for you to understand, because so much stuff happens at the end of this book that carries over to the second book that just would not make sense without her in it. And the fact that she's not in the screenplay, she's not on the casting, she's not in the movie, kind of worries me, but I am trying to be open to the idea of them tying her into the second movie, but it still wouldn't really make that much sense to me. So we'll see. But that's the review for the Hunger Games. I'll be doing another review for Catching Fire if you'd like. I also have a blog that's called Movies and Books. I'll put the link down below that you can go to. There'll be other reviews for different books and different movies. And leave your comments or questions if you have any. Thanks.